values to lead this country to a better place. And you know that America is in trouble. And before I talk about a few things about how to get out of this hole, we should remember how we got into the mess. One of the reasons we got into the mess is because the Democrats in Iowa and elsewhere across this country thought it was a good idea to put somebody in the Oval Office who had never run anything before. So we had President Obama, before he became president, was a community organizer. He was a college professor. And then he was in the United States Senate long enough to have a cup of coffee before it got cold. And then we put him in the Oval Office, made him President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief, and we wonder why it's not working. So I think it's important for our country to realize that in these most challenging of times, the next president should have run something before we put him or her in the office. Number two, he was like an elixir salesman rolling through town who made a lot of promises, made a lot of fancy speeches, had this incredible soaring rhetoric. The bottom line is, he didn't do any of it. He's been in office 3 years, and he not only made these promises that he broke, but he took the country on, I think, a very dangerous and misguided path. And I won't go through it all, but here's a couple of highlights from his best of broken promises record. Number one, he says, we'll do health care reform the right way. He stood in Iowa on the night of the Iowa caucuses. And he looked the people of Iowa and America in the eye and said, if I'm President of the United States, I'll fix the health care system. We'll do it with Republicans. We will focus on cost containment. And as a candidate, he was opposed to the individual mandate. And then he went to Washington, D.C. and led the charge to jam down our throats and the throats of our country, one of the most partisan, one of the most misguided pieces of legislation in the modern history of the country. And then he said in March of 2009, after he knew the magnitude of the economic challenge, after he knew about the financial challenges of the country, he looked the American people in the eye and said, during my first term as president, I will cut the budget deficit in half. Now, he didn't cut it in half. He tripled it. And he's not even done with his third year in office. And then he says, look, if you elect me president, or I actually was president at the time, if you pass the stimulus bill, or if you don't pass the stimulus bill, unemployment could go all the way up to 8%. And then they passed the stimulus bill, which turned out to be mostly a government sustenance bill. Unemployment didn't go to 8%, it went to 10%. And the list goes on and on and on. I share those with you because we now have somebody who not only was ill-prepared for the office, did not have the executive experience to be president, but made 10 or 15 major promises to the people of this country and broke almost every one of them, and now's got the country on a dangerous and misguided path. There's a lot of issues underneath the hood, but when I go to places like Iowa and Florida and all around the country, I ask everyday folks, how do you like $4 a gallon gas? Or nearly so. How do you like crushing levels of unemployment? How do you like a federal government that is out of control and seemingly incapable of making any bold or dramatic or transformative process for the country that we love? And the answer is the American people don't like it very much. They're prepared to throw him out of office, and he should be thrown out of office. And now the main way we're going to goof this up as Republicans, as conservatives, is to nominate the wrong candidate. If you look at Barack Obama's numbers nationally, they're not very good. If you look at Barack Obama's numbers in swing states that are actually going to decide the election, the 6 or 8 that are going to be the final tail of the tape, his numbers are awful. And so he is ripe for the picking. And the question is, does the party, our party, going to have the good judgment, and I believe it will, to put somebody forward who can not only be the party's nominee, who can not only beat Barack Obama, but is prepared to be President of the United States and leader of the free world and the Commander-in-Chief. And so our party's going to have some interesting choices in this race. Let me tell you a few things that I bring to the race. Number one, I've run something, not in a place where you rubber stamp things, but I've run it in one of the most difficult political environments in the country. I tell people being a conservative governor of Minnesota is like being the conservative governor of Vermont or California. Some of you are old enough to remember Eugene McCarthy, or Walter Mondale, or Hubert Humphrey, or Paul Wellstone, or Jesse Ventura, or now we have in Minnesota, and we hear this really clearly, United States Senator Al Franken. And so as Frank Sinatra would sing about New York, if we can do it in Minnesota and effectuate conservative change, we can do it anywhere. Number two, all the candidates, or many of them, are going to say many of the same things. They're going to say, you elect me president on the Republican side, and they'll say, I'll reduce spending, I'll reduce taxes, I'll fix schools the right way through accountability and choice. They'll say that they'll really take on the public employee unions and get their compensation in line with the private sector. They'll say, I'll do health care reform the right way. They'll go down the list and talk about being pro-life and pro-traditional marriage and all the other issues that Republicans talk about. And look, as I said, any bobblehead can stand up here and mouth the right words for what conservatives and Republicans expect on the policy direction of the country. But an important follow-up question is, have you done any of it? Because there's a big difference between shooting your mouth off and flapping your jaw and actually leading and getting things done. And so in the state of Minnesota, if you look at my record, what you'll see is this. We took spending from historic highs to historic lows. We cut taxes net over 8 years, even though we had the effects of 2 recessions during those 8 years. We were one of the first states in the country to move from seniority pay for teachers to performance pay for teachers. And we had World War III in a political sense with the teacher unions over that issue and similar education reform issues. As governor of my state, we led the charge to take on the public employee compensation issues before it was the cool and popular Indian thing to do. We did it years ago. We did health care reform the right way. No takeovers, no individual mandates. We got one of the best now Supreme Court appointments in the country for conservatives and Republicans because I took that responsibility very seriously and on down the list. So I think you'll like the record. The Cato Institute gave precisely 4 governors in the country an A grade for fiscal stewardship and leadership, and they're tough graders. The other 3 aren't running for president. The other 3 aren't even thinking about running for president. And I'm the 4th one. Now, we also have to be more than just talking about what we did in the past or bashing Barack Obama. And I won't go through it all, but job one is we got to get this economy moving again. And Barack Obama understands that he thinks central planning is the way to go forward. The way forward is freedom and free markets and private enterprise. I gave a speech a few weeks ago at the University of Chicago, his former place of employment. And I won't go through the whole thing. It's all online at timpawlenty.com. But the highlights were these. Take the corporate tax rate from one of the highest in the world to one of the best in the world. Clean out as many of the special deals, deductions, credits, and exemptions underneath that, because in exchange for reducing the corporate rate from 35% down to 15%, we should expect our corporations to then compete on a level playing field that's open and transparent and pro-growth and pro-investment. And their ability to succeed in the marketplace should depend on their ability to connect to customers, not their ability to connect to members of Congress and lobbyists. Number 2, take the individual rates from 6 down to 2, 10 and 25%, and eliminate, let me repeat, eliminate taxation on capital gains, interest, dividends, and the estate tax. And then it goes through